Hello there, once again it's Hugh here, welcoming you to episode 7 of the Friendly Podcast, a project made possible by the support of Ireland Yearly Meeting. Throughout this series, I'm sharing a range of interviews with folks from both home and abroad to explore what makes us friends today. First up this time, we say hello to Nigel Bell, who attends Monkstown Meeting in South Dublin.
My mum and dad were and are Quakers. And so Quaker influence was strong from the very, very beginning. So I can't remember anything different. Both were members of Rathfarnham Preparative Meeting. So that's where we grew up, and then moved across to Churchtown, where I spent a lot of my younger adult years. And then due to kind of where I live now, it's Monkstown. So I've dabbled in many of the preparative meetings, and Quakerism is part of my DNA. And I suppose it's a testament to both of them that myself, brother and sister, remain connected with friends in some shape or form. So it's been from the very beginning, and I know no different.
So do you think it's different for somebody who's born into Friends compared to somebody who finds Quakerism later in life? Do you think there's a distinctive difference there?
Oh, I do. And I remember meeting a friend over coffee, in Monkstown maybe a year ago, and he had a very interesting observation. He reckoned Quakers would be extinct 50 years ago if it hadn't been for those who came into Friends later on in life. Those that are born into Friends, I think many accept it and carry on their life, but maybe not that active. Whereas those that I think enter the society later on in their life often are quite active because they've made a very driven decision to join the society. Whereas those like myself maybe take it for granted because, we know no different and we haven't really gone searching.
So do you think because of that, you might look at outreach? Is that more important for those to spread the word?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Friends are particularly bad at that, which is one of their attractive features, because I think they live their lives in a Quakerly way. And I'm not sure, certainly for me, I have this burning desire to spread the message of Quakerism. Often by intrigue and inquisition, I would meet people and we would chat about it, but it would only be on inbound inquiries. I really wouldn't go offering that this is the way I think about something because I'm a Quaker. So no, I've never personally felt, and I haven't experienced Quakerism going out and trying to capture members.
So have you found between Rathfarnham and Churchtown and Monkstown, have you found there's been much changes in those meetings over the years? Or do you think there's something distinctive about the relationship between those meetings compared to other ones that you might find down the country?
I think they're all remarkably similar. I think if I went into any and I closed my eyes and the smells and the noises would all be very similar. I've had the fortune to visit all of them over the last 2 years for various reasons, albeit I go most regularly to Monkstown. So no, I think they're all the members are remarkably similar. I think they all share very similar challenges, and I think they all actually, to the major extent, have the desire and future vision for Friends. So I think there's an awful lot of similarity in them, albeit they have very different parishes and societies in each one.
I'm just conscious in terms of the changes that Dublin would have gone through over the years. So I only know Eustace Street with the IFI being there, and Quaker House is relatively new in Stocking Lane. Growing up in the city, were those sorts of changes were quite prominent?
Yeah, they would have been. As the society is sort of a self-managed organization. Through my parents in later life myself, I was very conscious of the big decisions that were made within Dublin Friends around Bloomfield and moving to Stocking Lane, disposing of property in Northampton Road, the decisions to downsize Eustace Street, and all of the dilemma that went on in selling part of that property to a cinema. So showed how Quakers made decisions in a very elongated and very challenging way, and also how they tried to move with the times. Eustace Street had become too big. There was financial considerations. Bloomfield it wasn't feasible staying where they were and making those decisions. So yes, they were big decisions for Dublin Quakers. And I think some of those decisions are bubbling up again because there is a sense that we don't need four meetings given the shrinking of the society within Dublin. So I've no doubt in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll be making other changes which will have a big impact on the society.
It's just hard. It's hard for me because I am such a fond attender of the IFI. And just to imagine that that's where a yearly meeting used to be held all those years. Like,
Yeah.
as far as I understand, yearly meeting didn't used to go anywhere but to Eustace Street.
Correct, because it's such a central location. So you could walk from the train station and the bus stations, plenty of accommodation. So no, you're absolutely right. And it was a majestic building. And I remember as a young friend having young friend events there, and it just seemed cavernous. So many stairs and corridors that you're running around. It was a tremendous sight. And again, it was a perfect location for a city centre meeting. So you're right. It's when you walk down into Temple Bar today and you go to that cinema, it's hard to imagine that was all part of the meeting house.
Has committee membership been a thing for you over the years, Nigel?
Yes, it has. And it was something that was voted heavily by my dad in particular, because all his life he'd been involved in various committees. So he was very encouraging, gosh, at a very young age, that we should take our responsibilities within the society and get involved in committees. So yes, I've been on a range and I still am involved in a reasonable amount of them. It can be challenging because it's a real conflict in terms of your time and all the stuff that goes on with family life, your work life, and everything. No, as I said to my mum the other day, if you buy into Quakerism, you really have to buy into participating at all levels, and that means it's nearly, in my mind, it's somewhat obligatory that you got to get involved in these business workings or thinking groups or overseer groups and the wide range that are there. So I am, and it is an important part. And actually, I think it's stood to me because getting involved in other voluntary activities isn't a big issue, because I've always been used to doing stuff in my spare time that is within committees. So albeit I do grumble sometimes about them and so on, I think actually it's been a great grounding, and I probably has enabled me to get involved in other things on a voluntary basis in a seamless way, because I'm used to the Quaker way of doing things.
So on that, is there anything that you appreciate? Love might be a strong word, but is there anything that you appreciate about the Quaker business method that we have in the yearly meeting?
There's lots actually I love. I think it's absolute ideal and right way for humans to think about decisions in a consensual way. And I think industry and businesses and boardrooms try to do this. And I think Quaker way of business, I think, is the only way to do it. It is deeply frustrating. And again, like in boardrooms, you do need a chairman who can, or a clerk in Quaker parlance, to sense the mood of the meeting, bring it along and make that decision. The challenge for Quakers is often those decisions are very sensitive. They can be highly emotive. So it is hard. And the other challenge is we've such a wide group in terms of their backgrounds and their ideologies. In business, it's easier because it's much more narrow, whereas in Friends, it's wide. So I think it's a wonderful, an ideal way to come to consensual decision making. Often it is very, very difficult. And I think sometimes it's so difficult that it can cause damage, because it's nearly impossible to formulate a decision. So the decision making is challenging. I think it is good. But I think invariably Friends get there in the end. It's often the scenic route, but we do get there in the end. And I think we are able to bring people with us. And there's a great understanding that compromise has to be met somewhere along the way.
Do you find that Quakerism itself has a huge impact on your day-to-day life, away from meeting for worship and gathering with people in a shared sort of environment?
Absolutely, it does. It has a huge impact every day. Today, it has a huge impact, and I know tomorrow it will, on all the bits and pieces we do. So treating people fairly, seeing that of God in everyone, the human being at the center of everything, kindness, fairness, and the importance of education, the importance of giving people a chance, treating people fairly, making fair decisions, being very straightforward and honest and clear. Absolutely. So no doubt it impacts my everyday.
So did you go to a Quaker school, Nigel?
No, I didn't. My dad was very keen to send me to Newtown, but my mum wasn't too into the boarding option. So we lived in Dublin, so I didn't. I went to Wesley College, which was close to us. So I didn't go to a Quaker school.
I'm just conscious, do you think by not going to a Quaker school, you've missed out somewhat?
I'm sure I did. I think probably for me, the gaps of not going to Quaker school were filled in by my home life and JYM and those other activities. So I think, that the Quaker principles were probably backfilled for the bit I missed out. Look, Friends have been at the forefront of education for so long. Between Friends in Lisburn, there was a school, the Drogheda Grammar School. It's gone the same way as Newtown into the public realm, and now Newtown has. So I think with Friends, we have to accept that society changes and that the ability to maintain a Quaker school, as Newtown was, call it 50 years ago, isn't appropriate anymore. So, the fact that Friends worked diligently to ensure that it remained viable and it went into the public infrastructure, I think that's a perfectly acceptable thing. And I think it's great that Quaker values can remain there. They may become a little bit diluted, but we have to accept society changes, and Friends' ability to sponsor and run these things isn't feasible anymore. So I think you and those who went to Newtown are very fortunate, because I think at an early age, getting exposure to those Quaker holistic principles is wonderful.
Do you think the pandemic has shown the relevance or the importance of Quakerism?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been incredible. And I think who would have thought Friends would hold meeting and all of our members be able to work Zoom, including myself, and sit in silence in your sitting room and feel the spirit move among us, which I think many of us felt. So I think COVID has shown the power of meeting, power of silent prayer. And I think it is underpinned one of our principles that you can hold meeting anywhere. We don't have to gather in our meeting house. It is preferable to do so, but actually meeting is equally powerful sitting at home. So I think COVID has definitely awakened us to that. I think it's also demonstrated that we do enjoy each other's company, and that for many of us, getting back in the same meeting house together is going to be a great joy. So yes, from a worship point of view, I think it's been really interesting.
Have you had the chance to travel and see other yearly meetings?
Yeah, I've traveled a lot, and the only yearly meeting, to my shame, that I've been to is in Sydney, Australia. So I was traveling out there visiting an uncle and aunt, and I went to a meeting just north of Sydney City, and it was a wonderful experience because, again, like I touched on earlier, I could close my eyes, and the smells and the type of people there were just like what they were in Churchtown, are in Churchtown. So I felt very at home. I was really, really impressed as a teenager of their social values, their social concerns, the work they did with the Aborigine groups. So really, they had the same motivations and connectivity with their community as we have at home, albeit a totally different world.
Do you find, having travelled abroad, that Irish Quakers face similar challenges in terms of how we do our business and our structures and things?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know too much about the Quaker structures abroad, but I definitely think we face the same challenges. So I was back in Australia 4 years ago, and it was very interesting spending time with family and their experience of their yearly meeting in Sydney. They were traveling to Canberra a couple of weeks later for their annual yearly meeting. Same concerns, low numbers, hard to get people involved. But yet the core was still there. Core values and the core leaders were still there, trying to drive it forward, and actually being quite impactful around events they were organizing on Australia Day. And as I think about Irish Friends, I think a lot of particularly our social concerns are remarkably similar. Our concerns for our community being relative and reaching those that are on the fringes of society. Aborigines in Australia, refugees in Germany and in Ireland, we try on some of those.
So on the flip side to that then, do you think there's anything that sets us apart or makes us unique?
Probably in Ireland, we probably have greater history to us that, for many of us, it can go back to the 1600s, the various Quaker families, and that's still going. So I think we probably have deeper historical roots. We've probably more similarities than differences. And I think maybe in Ireland, we clearly we have the north and south, so we've a great opportunity to bring those two different culture types together, as we do in an All Ireland meeting. And maybe in Southern Ireland, we're somewhat less evangelical than other friends. So maybe we're more relaxed on that front.
In the summer of 2010, I was lucky enough to be part of the group who travelled on the Quaker Youth Pilgrimage, a bi-yearly event organised by Friends World Committee for consultation. For many decades, QIP was a powerful spiritual and community experience for young friends around the world. I met Marguerite Daw during my time on the pilgrimage in the USA, and we reconnected 10 years after we first met.
What's interesting about my life in Quakerism before the pilgrimage and compared to after is that right before I was living with my dad in St. Louis, and my mom was living in Houston, and I had grown up in the Houston meeting, in Live Oak Friends meeting. And then I came to St. Louis Friends meeting at the start of high school, grade 9. And I was the only person my age in that meeting. And so in the 2 years before the pilgrimage, I was attending St. Louis Friends meeting, but then also occasionally visiting my mom back in Houston and catching up with my friends at Live Oak Friends meeting. And so it was like a transitional stage for me. And after the pilgrimage, my mom had moved on to the DC area, and she started attending Silver Spring Friends meeting. I guess at that stage, I started becoming involved with more like high school friends. Yeah, so I started attending more of like the regional friends activities and sort of more exploring the diversity of Quakerism, because like it is different from like meeting to meeting and yearly meeting to yearly meeting.
Through that discovery, was there certain things that struck you as being interesting that you took with you?
The emphasis on the Bible was like interesting to me. Like in Live Oak Friends meeting, like I learned about some of the Bible in first day school, but it's not like that was the focus. And I guess like other meetings that I started attending, like it was interesting how much was referencing to the Bible and if that was the focus, or if like maybe like they were just looking for lessons in the Bible.
And do you find that the silence is welcome in your life at that time too, or even now? How do you find your approach to meeting has changed over the years? Yeah,
so once I started attending college, I wasn't attending as much, but I still occasionally attended, and I still feel like tied to Quakerism, but I haven't been attending as much. And sometimes I like stop and think like, am I leading a life like worthy of being considered Quaker? And like I try to like hold true to like simplicity and community and peace, and sort of just live by the testimonies.
Are there some days that are easier than others in trying to find that?
It's hard to say. I guess for right now, it's like hard for me to find a community just because people that I grew up with are like all over the place now and I can't meet up with them. So the community aspect has changed, I think.
Tell me about your experiences in Tanzania. That Was that something you always wanted to do? Did that come out of the blue in some ways?
I had grown up among Quakers who had done the Peace Corps. And so the Peace Corps is a U.S. organization where they send skilled individuals to countries with a stated need. And so I started really exploring the option of the Peace Corps, I guess, in my last couple of years of college. And I started researching and talking with friends that I knew who had done the Peace Corps. And in my research, I knew that I wanted to teach science because I was a physics major. And so that's what I brought to the table was science. And the only options for science education was in Africa. And so I applied and was accepted to the Tanzanian program. And my parents were initially oh gosh, why are you going all the way to Africa? But there was a friend that my dad contacted, Dave Zaremka, who unfortunately died recently in Kenya. But he assured my father he lives in Kenya, or he lived in Kenya. It's perfectly fine to live in that part of the world.
How long were you there for?
I was there for a little over 2 years.
Do you remember how you felt before you went?
I was excited, but nervous. I'd never been outside of the Western sphere of influence. I'd been all over the U.S., visited Canada and England and France, but I'd never, been to an undeveloped area of the world. So I was a little bit nervous about that.
So you apply for the job and you get accepted. So what's the process like after that before you go?
A long medical clearance process. And so I had to, get a bunch of vaccines, have, medical tests, make sure I was in peak medical condition or adequate medical condition to go. And then there were packing lists that I went through. I read up on various blogs of other volunteers, see what their experiences were like. And then we met initially in Philadelphia, and we had a small cultural awareness training there before flying off to Tanzania. And the first few months there was technical and language training. So we learned Swahili until we had achieved an adequate proficiency. Not all of us were trained in teaching, and so we got some teacher training, and we got cultural training as well, learning about what life is like in Tanzania.
Did you find that it took you a while to adapt? Or did you feel out of your comfort zone at some point initially?
Definitely initially, I felt a little bit out of my comfort zone. We lived with a host family, and initially I would just stay in my room a little bit or go to bed earlier than everybody else. But once I started learning the language, I could get along with them, and my host mama taught me how to cook and using a charcoal stove, and yeah.
Did you have a typical sort of day then when you got going? What was your regime like?
Once I was at my site, I would wake up in the morning and eat my oatmeal. They had Quaker oats oatmeal over there. So I'd eat that every morning with bananas, and then I would listen to the students sing the national anthem and the student song or the school song. And I would go prepare my lessons for the day. So I taught O level, so Form 1, Form 2 physics. And so generally I had like 2-hour blocks, 2 2-hour blocks with Form 2s and 1 2-hour block and 1 1-hour block with Form 1s, and spread out over the course of the week. And I would try to make sure that everybody was each class was on the same page. I tried to incorporate demonstrations and experiments using local materials. So like I made a car out of soda bottle and soda bottle caps and sticks and whatnot, to like demonstrate velocity and acceleration.
Did you find the students were quite receptive?
Definitely. I mean, so they, most of them, their first language is their tribal language. Their second language is Swahili. And then for starting at O level, they have to learn everything in English. And before, like in primary school, they're learning everything in Swahili. So it's like a major adjustment to go from all Swahili classes to all English classes. And so like the demonstrations, like where they could actually see what's happening, rather than just copy what's on a blackboard, definitely helped in their understanding. And like I got more joy out of like watching them like learn through doing than like them doing well on a test, because like they didn't know English all that well, and so the tests were all in English, and they definitely struggled with that. But I knew that they understood the concept if they could like see it happening.
I haven't been to Africa, but I get a sense that if you want it to be, life can be quite simple.
Yes, I had no running water. There was no running water in my village. And initially there wasn't any electricity. When I went to do my site visit, there was no electricity there. And when I came back to like live there for the rest of my service, there was electricity. And several months after I was working there, they wired the girls' dormitory that was at the school up to the electricity. And I asked, like, can I have my house wired up? And so they did that. For a while, like Tuesdays, there was no electricity. I just knew like, oh, it's Tuesday, there's no electricity. And sometimes like I would go for like a week without it, but it didn't really matter that much to me if I had it or not.
Did you find you learned a lot about how you live or about yourself in general when you were there?
Yeah. I mean, I tried to like write in a journal, and it was like the first time since the pilgrimage that I had like kept up with a journal. That
must have been very cathartic. Very cathartic.
Yeah, it was. Sometimes I like had to like get out my frustrations, but yeah, I learned to be resourceful with what I had. Like I only came over with like 2 weeks worth of clothes, and like I added some stuff throughout my 2 years, but for the most part, that's what I lived off of. So like I learned that I could do without. Like I only had 2 suitcases of stuff that I brought over with me, and that's what I lived with for 2 years.
Did you have any sense of the Quaker community in the area? How close was that in terms of your work and your connection to that?
So I there was no Quaker community in my area, which is surprising because Kenya has like the most Quakers in the world, but then the neighboring country of Tanzania doesn't.
Did you find that you missed that when you were there?
I think so. So I like I tried to like find Quakers, and like I found something that maybe there were some Quakers in a town called Kiela. I visited there, couldn't find anything. But I did like attend some services, like church services while I was in Tanzania. My host family was Lutheran, so I attended a Lutheran service, and then one of the teachers at my school invited me to go one Sunday, and so I went. And it was very different from a Quaker meeting for worship, because they start out and like there's these loud songs, like they have speakers on full blast, and I thought I was gonna go deaf just sitting in front of the speakers. And so like it's very different from like a Quaker silence. And like I would ask if like people knew about Quakers. Like people would like ask me like, oh, like what's your religion? I'd be like, oh, I'm Quaker. And I looked up the definite, like in the Kiswahili English dictionary, I looked up what Quaker was in Swahili, and it was like Duni Kikristo cha urafiki na amani, or something similar to that, which is like literally the Christian religion of friends and peace. When I told people I was Quaker, I got like the Quaker oats question a couple of times, like, oh, like the oatmeal. I'm like, yes, sort of. I didn't expect that, like when I went over there to get that, but then there was Quaker oatmeal over there. One headmaster that I talked to of the school that I did my training at, he's like, oh yes, like when I visited England, like I saw some Quakers there. So yeah, but like otherwise people didn't know about Quakers.
That is quite striking, as you say, because Tanzania and Kenya are literally next to each other.
Yeah, like when I visited Moshi, which is in the north and borders Kenya, I did see a sign for like a friend's school, and I don't know if that was associated with Quakers or not.
How long are you back home?
2.5 years now.
So is there much that you've held on to apart from the experience itself being so transformative, no doubt? Are there sort of little sort of things you hold on to?
I think just knowing that I can, like, I don't need anything, like, or knowing that like I don't need luxury items, I guess. Like I can do without, watching a TV program. Because like beforehand, like I would like follow like week to week, different TV programs, but like I couldn't do that once I got to Tanzania. And so like I think I've like fallen off of like following programs, but that's a weird one.
Did you find when you were over there that you lost track of the news in general and what was going on in the world?
Yeah, it was weird coming back, and like when I left, Obama was the president. When I came back, Trump was the president. And that was weird to get used to, because I didn't get like how because like I didn't like watch any of like the debates or any like of the coverage of the election. Like I followed the headlines, like I had a Twitter that like I follow headlines, but I didn't get how weird it was that like how weird Trump was as a president. I knew he I sent in my ballot like by mail to vote for Hillary Clinton. And like that was an experience, like the day after election day, like waking up and like following the election results. So like it's interesting because the most I could be engaged with, like when in Tanzania, was like posting to social media. Like I couldn't like be involved in any sort of protests. Like I think like I remember like the day of the Women's March. Like I walked to one of my site mates' houses and we're like, yeah, like this is our Women's March. But yeah, so I think like it's like I could have like an outspoken voice, and like I learned that like it's okay to do that, and like you don't have to be present in order to like be engaged.
Do you find Quakers in general could be more active on things?
I think part of the issue is the thinking that we need consensus, and I think that some meetings feel that they can't necessarily speak out on an issue unless everybody is in agreement. But I think that that's so like there's the testimonies and like we can all agree on those, but like how to act on that is I think what's where some meetings vary. I definitely was aware growing up that like meetings were very white, and I think like especially like compared to like my school life, like comparing like the demographics of my school like compared to meeting inequality. Like what's interesting to me, so like I grew up mostly in South Central yearly meeting, and I would go like every other year, and then I was part of Illinois yearly meeting, but like I've never felt part of yearly meetings elsewhere that I've lived. Like I lived in New York for college and then after the Peace Corps, and I never felt part of that community. And now I'm in California, and I'm on like a message group, and I was on a message group for Brooklyn Friends, but like I still don't feel part of that community yet.
But
and I don't know.
I'm just saying it's different too in the sense though, because I live in Ireland, and as I'm sure you can appreciate, Ireland is quite small.
Yeah.
I'm in Dublin these days, and I can be, up in Belfast in less than 2 hours. I could be in Cross and Galway in about 3 at a push, down to Waterford or Cork in maybe 2. So America is massive, and it's a thing of scale to a certain degree.
Right.
It's not as easy to. I'm sure I can't fully appreciate, but or relate, but I would assume that it's a question of geography and location and where you find that you are at any given time.
Yeah. Like so, like for South Central yearly meeting, it was always held over Easter break, and we only went like every other year, and I guess it took several hours to drive there. Yeah, I guess even though like your yearly meeting is the whole island, and like it's still smaller than many yearly meetings in America. I think I feel closest ties to Illinois yearly meeting because I felt like I was so involved in it, in South Central yearly meeting.
So do you think it's an overall question of how best friends do outreach? Is that kind of what you're saying, do you think?
Yeah, so like with Illinois yearly meeting, every few months, like the high school friends would get together and we would have quakes.
Have quakes? They'd have quakes. What are quakes now? Explain, please.
So yeah. So it's a gathering of young friends, and we would usually have one in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, and then there would be Illinois yearly meeting in the summer, and so it was just we would choose like a meeting house to go to, and we would arrive Friday evening and sort of just like get to know one another, and we might have an out trip in the afternoon. And then Sunday, since we were at a meeting house, we would we would have meeting with the members of the meeting, and then we would leave Sunday afternoon, usually over Martin Luther King Day. It was our big one, and it would be it would be over 2 days, and like Saturday and Sunday we would have activities because Monday was usually a day off of school for most people. And so that was the big one that we had in Chicago each year. And we would get people from other yearly meetings there as well. So it wasn't just Illinois yearly meeting. There was also Lake Erie yearly meeting and Northern yearly meeting. We would have people. So like we had like 40 people there one year. So like workshops, we had one which dealt with, I guess, racial inequality with Vanessa July. And then another year we had John Watts come and do some performing and also songwriting workshop. And he talked about how he's used songwriting in his Quaker journey.
So just curious, just sort of in the here and now, how do you get time to meditate or, feel like you want to be grounded or get away from everything? Is there a certain process that you have or things that you attract to get you kind of in a meditative or spiritual sense?
Yeah, it's interesting because I haven't really attended meeting recently, but I think.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, even though you might have been to meeting recently,
right?
What sort of alternative methods do you use to feel grounded?
I think recently it's been hiking, and just getting away from the apartment, which I spend most of my time now. But yeah, I like just seeing the beauty of the mountains and the beach. And yeah, I think sometimes like when we go to the beach and we just sit there, listening to the waves. And I find that like that grounds me definitely.
So where do you hike? Where do you actually hike? Can you give me a sense of the geography of where you are?
Yeah, so I'm in Ventura, and so
you're close to the highway. You're close to the highway.
Yeah, close to the highway. And so like where I am, so like it's in between LA and Santa Barbara, along the coast. And so like all along the coast, there's like beach right there, but then there's also mountains. And so a lot of the hikes, like it'll you'll have like a view of the ocean, islands, but like you'll be in the mountains as well. And so yeah, so like there's like the Santa Monica Mountains to the south, so we've done a couple hikes there. Yesterday we went to a state park where there's a hike that starts along the beach but then just goes into a mountains, and there's some caves that you can sit in. We've been to Ojai, and there's some nice trails in the mountains there.
Yeah. And what do you get out of hiking? Is there what does it give you?
I hear the birds and just like appreciating the nature around us. But then also like there's the physical aspect, like I'm working to just have a better body, have a healthy body.
And with that nice weather that you've got, yeah, who could
Yeah.
really complain, in fairness? Yeah. I'm not going to say that I'm jealous, but I'm definitely jealous.
Yeah. Like, what's interesting is that I think my pandemic life is similar to my Tanzanian life, in that I'm sort of like home most of the time. We only do our shopping like once a week or once every 2 weeks. Like in Tanzania, market day was every Tuesday. So every Tuesday afternoon, I would go to the market and like buy my groceries for the week. And it's like that's it's like I had to like, plan what I needed. It's like that's similar to how it is here now. But I think what I say is like one of the things that I miss the most is the cheap exotic fruit. So it's like, this is like especially like one fruit called blood fruit that I haven't been able to find since I've been here. And they had really good passion fruit there, but then there's also this other fruit that was related to passion fruit that like had a sweeter taste. It wasn't as tart as passion fruit was. Miss how cheap the avocados were. And like, because what was interesting is that like at the same time that I was in Tanzania was when the whole like avocado toast controversy was. And it was interesting to me. I was like, yeah, for me, the hardest part about avocado toast in Tanzania was the toast. Like bread wasn't as like widely available in my village. So yeah, the avocado part was the easy part for me.
Did you get to travel much when you were in Tanzania outside of your kind of realm of work and home?
Yeah. So they have like month-long vacation like in June and then in the Christmas holiday. So my parents came to visit me once. We went to Moshi, and we went to Zanzibar. And then my partner, Jonathan, he also came to visit a couple of times. We went to Zanzibar and we went to Victoria Falls. We went on safari in the Serengeti and in Ngorongoro. And then right before I left, I climbed Kilimanjaro. And then I also visited the chimps in Gombe, which is where Jane Goodall did her work. So
amazing, Marguerite. That's amazing.
I'm very like grateful that I was able to like travel around Africa or in East Africa.
And how do you feel now in this moment in the world about the future amidst the pandemic? How do you feel? How are you reading the world these days?
I'm feeling optimistic.
Good.
Yeah, I think.
How strong are your Quaker roots these days? Does that inform much of your feeling about the world too?
I think so. I mean, if you'd caught me like on a different day, I might have said something like that I wasn't as optimistic, but I think I feel like we're making steps towards change. My Quaker upbringing definitely makes me think on the more positive side of things. I'm definitely hopeful for change. And I think that we're getting back to the way things were and maybe have changed habits to be more sustainable, hopefully. I think living in Tanzania and like they burned all their trash, or I think I'm definitely more mindful about what I consume.
Would you find your life is quite simplistic then these days?
I think definitely more simplistic than from before. Yeah. I like when I came back and I was going through like my my room at my dad's house, and just knowing that for 2.5 years I survived without anything in that room just like made me think like I don't need any of this. And so a lot of it like I gave away.
Was that mostly clothes and an extra pair of shoes and
yeah, clothes, shoes, toys, art supplies. Yeah.
Were you flabbergasted, kind of maybe slightly overwhelmed that you had so much stuff?
Oh yes, most definitely.
That must have been like an epiphany of some sort.
Like 6 like huge trash bags full of like my clothes, and I'm like, how did I have this many clothes?
Wow. You probably weren't expecting that when you came back, were you?
No, it's also like because I had also like brought a bunch of stuff with me to college, and so like some of the clothes like I hadn't even worn since high school. So I was like, I definitely don't need all of it.
Just going back to the QIP for a sec, do you have any sense or of remembering of how you felt before the trip itself?
Like I remember getting the letter and being really excited about it. So summers for Americans are generally like 2.5 or 3 months. And so that was a jam-packed summer for me. So like the first week I went to France with my family, and then I was in summer school for 6 weeks. And then I did the pilgrimage, and then when I got back from the pilgrimage, started right back up at school.
I have a very strong memory of feeling depressed is probably the wrong word, but I think because it was so momentous, what we should, it was so, it was just so, I guess, overpowering what we shared as a group on that month away.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like the world was closing in, or I didn't really want to talk to anybody else because no one could relate to what we shared. And yeah, I just sort of felt like I was on my own for a good few weeks after that. It took me a long time to get over that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely remember feeling a little bit down on the plane ride back because I was by myself on the plane.
Yeah.
And like said goodbye to everybody at the airport. Yeah, and I remember I definitely remember being emotionally drained, and like I think like a day or two after I got back, I definitely just like napped for a while.
Yeah, same here. I do remember that.
I wrote my college essay about the pilgrimage and my experience. I remember, I think it was about accepting that I was more spiritual and not grounded. I don't know, the experience wasn't grounded in like the religion necessarily, but just more of like experience. Yeah. And I think with like regards to like the connections, like I think I remember how like we were all like capital F friends at the beginning because we were Quakers, but at the end we were, like lowercase friends.
Since its foundation in the 1930s, Irish Young Friends have always had a strong connection with the Yorkshire Friends Holiday School. It has grown and changed considerably through the years and now hosts over 100 13 to 18-year-olds each year at Bootham School. Ellie McCarthy is just one among a long list of alumni.
Well, I only got to know it when my sisters went, because I'm the youngest of 3 sisters. So that was when I first got to know it. And it was like the thing that my sisters both like looked forward to for the whole year, and I was really sad that I couldn't go when I was younger, and my sisters would be crying when we'd come to pick them up at the end of the week. So it was like there was high expectations for it before I went, and it definitely lived up to them. But yeah, I think that the Irish connection, somebody did tell me where it came from, and I can never remember the story anymore, but it's been definitely for at least a few decades that it seemed like a third or so of the participants were from Ireland and Northern Ireland. So yeah, it was a lot of Irish Quakers, which was awesome because I'd never met Irish Quakers before holiday school. And yeah, it's just really nice to know lots of Irish Quakers now. So it's cool.
Did you find going to holiday school had an influence in you maybe going to meeting more, or was that ever on your radar? Did you feel like you could be more of a Quaker than just a weekend during the year, during the summer?
That's an interesting question. I think I was always quite a regular meeting goer in general when I was about that age. This was kind of like early teenage years. So it didn't really affect my going to meeting that much. But it definitely was kind of a very different thing to going to meeting. You know, it was kind of fun in a really different way to meeting, and it was Quakerism in a different way as well, because it's kind of just finding the community. I think the community is really the most important thing, isn't it, with holiday school? So it was just being part of this amazing community of friends from around the UK and Ireland and Northern Ireland, and yeah, just having fun and talking about things and being whoever you wanted to be, which I think is one of the best things about young Quaker events. So it was definitely a massive kind of input into my life that was very different to Quaker meeting, and yeah, a really important one.
Do you get a sense that we lose some of that as we get older? Just the need or the want to be silly?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think I've been quite lucky in actually working on young Quaker events basically since I became an adult. I've kind of done volunteering in young Quaker events, which has kind of allowed me to keep that silliness, because you kind of have to embody that a bit as a staff member and a volunteer. And I worked for Quakers in Britain a couple of years ago as the Children and Young People's Team intern, and that was doing all the young Quaker events in the UK, the national ones, and that was awesome because yeah, it really allows you to kind of be creative and have those connections with the young people, which obviously you're not a young person anymore, but you get to still join in and have fun, and yeah, I think that's true actually about maybe as you get older in Quakerism, there's less opportunities for that, and I think it's a really nice thing when, like, at a Britain Yearly meeting, for example, when there is lots of really fun, cool things to do, because you're like, oh yeah, we can still have fun together as well as kind of just sitting in silence and discussing important things and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a challenge, but it can happen.
I find, having been involved with JYM planning in the past, I forget just how much energy you have as an 18-year-old, even as a 16-year-old.
Yeah, definitely staying up all night is definitely a thing that you can do when you're that age, isn't it? And that's a challenge as a staff member, I think, when you're an adult staff member, and it's like you have to stay up as long as they stay up. That's difficult. No, totally. And all the amount that they eat as well. Like, there's some teenagers just need to eat so much to keep that energy going, and you're like, yeah, wow, it's a big task for the caterers of these events. But yeah, totally. And I think I missed that a bit, and in lockdown you kind of miss those events where you can just go and kind of have fun and just be out with your friends, and it's like, oh, you really want to do that. Even more than you kind of realize the importance of doing that as an adult as well, just finding fun.
Is there anything else that struck you working with young friends, just about the way they present themselves, or things maybe that you hadn't fully appreciated before?
I think one of the really cool things that I've seen in more recent years with young friends is, because I think it's always been that Quaker events have been a really good place for feeling safe and included and creating a sense of diversity and inclusiveness, which means that people feel like they are able to kind of show who they really are and just be comfortable with that. But definitely there's been so much more of a opening up of gender, non-binary and transgender in the young Quaker community. And I think that's just been it's been really inspiring to kind of know these people who are younger than me, who are, you know, coming out as gender non-binary and transgender, and you know, being like real activists for that cause and kind of educating people about it and stuff. And it's just amazing to see that, and to know these people who are doing that. I find it so inspiring. So
do you think the wider yearly meeting is aware of that?
At the moment, there is a big discussion within Quakers in Britain about all of that, and it has been tense at times, probably still is a bit tense at times, which is difficult, but it's really important that it's happening, and that there are lots of people who are being advocates for it and are, you know, being allies to the cause and things like that, who are kind of helping to educate people. And it's a really important discussion that is happening, and I think it's going to be a big thing to come up in yearly meetings and stuff in the future.
So you were lucky enough to work at Quaker House in London, right?
Yes.
I've been lucky enough to visit a couple of times, but for those who haven't, could you possibly describe it? What did you like about working there?
Interesting. It's a really big building on Euston Road. I think it was built in like the 1920s. It's a lovely building, and it's got a nice little garden outside, and it's basically full of offices which house all these people who are working on different Quaker issues and events and stuff, as well as all the kind of admin and stuff that goes on behind the scenes just to help a whole organization like that work. So there are different departments like Quaker Life, which the Children and Young People's team was part of, and that's the team that I was part of. And there's QPSW, which stands for Quaker Peace and Social Witness, and they do stuff about peace education and disarmament and social justice, climate change, things like that. And then there's kind of the kind of head of Quakers in Britain, who is Paul Parker at the moment, and he has his offices on the other side, and it's all about the kind of management of the organization. So there's tons of people around doing lots of different things, and I think that one of the things that I enjoyed most about working there was just getting to know these people who were doing just incredible work in all these different areas, which are really important. And just being able to be a bit involved in some of that work, and seeing, again, being inspired, I guess, by these people who are really all activists, but being able to kind of be activists in their jobs, which is a really cool kind of job to have, and having all that support behind it as well. You know, it's a whole massive organization, and obviously it's a lot funded a lot by Quakers, like by local Quakers in Britain, as well as investments and people's wills and stuff. But it's brilliant to just have that ability for all of this work to go ahead, really. So it's exciting.
Euston Road is quite central, right?
Yeah, very central.
My London geography is a bit patchy, but I'm just wondering, like, being on Euston Road and being, so centrally based, do you think others who aren't connected to the early meeting have a sense of what the staff do in Friends House? Do you think it's do you think it feels like it's part of the kind of wider community of sorts?
I think,
or do you think it's quite self-contained?
I think the staff think that it is kind of known to everyone in Britain, but I think it was a good experience for me to come from York, which is quite far away from London, and with the knowledge that I didn't really know what was going on in that place at all before I went to work there. So I think it's really important to kind of hold on to that and think, okay, how can we be getting the word out there to the local meetings and making those links with the local meetings. And they do a lot of kind of different people do kind of little tours of local meetings and stuff in Britain, and talk to local Quakers about things. But I think there's definitely a separation between local Quaker stuff and the stuff that goes on down there. Yeah.
So what do you love about York meeting then?
So there's actually a few meetings in York, because it was a proper kind of Quaker hotspot at one point. So I grew up going to New Earswick Quaker meeting, it was founded by Joseph Rowntree, who built the whole village of Newiswick in York, and he was the famous chocolate maker, and he had his chocolate factory in York, which makes everything smell lovely, which is great. So that was a good plus for going to that meeting, is the smell of chocolate. But yeah, that meeting it's a really lovely meeting, and I kind of grew up there and made some really close friends there, and I have this lovely kind of group of adults as well who have seen me grow up and always supporting me in things, and I still feel a good sense of security and supportedness when I go there. But I also sometimes attend Acomb Quaker meeting, which is the one more local to me, which is a smaller meeting and a bit more simple maybe, and just a different feel. I feel like you've got to find the right Quaker meeting for you sometimes, and sometimes that changes as you go through life. And yeah, sometimes that one just feels a bit more right for me. So yeah, and then there's a really big one in the centre of York as well called Friargate, which is about 150 people or something, on a good day. And it's really nice to have so many Quakers in York, because you get to know lots of different people, and there's some really interesting things going on with Quakers in York. But yeah, I think I prefer the smaller side of Quaker meetings at the moment. So Acomb is the one that I go to more often now. Recently, I've really enjoyed doing meeting like outside, actually, because when it's on Zoom, I can just take my phone outside and just sit in the garden, and that's really nice. But I think it's nice to have that time of traveling to meeting, to almost get your head in the right space for meeting when you are going to an actual meeting house. But no, I don't have a special chair or anything. I like to look outside when I can, so facing a window. But then sometimes you're also wanting to look at the time, and the clock's often on the opposite wall. So yeah, you got to make that decision about how sneaky you can be looking when meeting's going to finish. That sounds bad. But sometimes I feel like I should kind of center down more. I still feel like it's hard to I don't know, to kind of get the most out of meeting. You kind of hear of all these stories of people having amazing experiences like every week in meeting, and it's like I barely ever get that kind of sense. But I think sometimes it's just just sitting still for an hour and not kind of thinking about anything in particular is sometimes just a useful place to be. So
do you find you get that during the week as well, not just on a Sunday morning?
Not much at the moment, as I'm doing my teacher training, which is really busy, which is unfortunate. Can't really have that time off that much. But again, being outside, going for a little walk is usually my way of kind of de-stressing and having a little relaxation time, and yoga. But yeah, I don't really do kind of meeting in the week, as it were.
One of the discussions we've had recently within our yearly meeting within the Young Friends cohort is growing out of the young Quaker community. I'm just wondering, have you had any sense of that, kind of conscious of leaving something behind and being part of something new?
Yeah, definitely. I think for instance, like when leaving holiday school, you're 20 and that's been a massive part of your life for like the last 7 years, and that's kind of your connection to a lot of young Quakers, and then suddenly it's not there anymore, and all the other young Quaker events are kind of over. We have a thing called Young Friends General Meeting in the UK. I don't know if you've got that over there as well. Yeah. But that I went to that once and it didn't quite feel like right for me. It's a lot of people who have joined Quakerism like since going to uni and stuff, which is, I didn't even realize there were many people like that, but apparently there is as well as people who grew up as a Quaker. But it just I didn't really feel like I needed it. But then there's a little bit of a void maybe after you kind of stop all those young Quaker events. But then I think I've been really lucky in as I say, like working and volunteering with Quakers and Quaker events kind of since becoming an adult. I guess I've always been kind of connected to it still. I think Britain Yearly Meeting has done quite a good job in trying to kind of address that problem a bit. So there was actually started 3 or 4 years ago, there started a project called the Engaging Young Adult Quakers project.
Okay.
Which was kind of specifically for that void kind of era where it's trying to kind of bridge the gap between the kind of 18, 19-year-olds and maybe 30-year-olds, as it were, where maybe there's more involvement again. And it's been really good to kind of start getting young Quakers just talking to themselves, really, talking to other young Quakers in your local area and nationally, for people to kind of be a bit more connected, to see maybe that there are more young Quakers around than you realise. But I think there is definitely it still feels like there's definitely a big kind of divide, a big kind of, I don't know, a strain between the kind of status quo of Quakers in terms of committees and the ways of running meetings and stuff, and then the way that the young Quakers can be involved because you're so busy. And I think young Quakers possibly have more pressures on their time nowadays, or more kind of pressures on their time across a whole week than like maybe our parents and that those generations had before when they were our age. Which means that it's just harder to be on all these committees. Plus, there's so many committees, and there's just so much to do. And I think I do get the sense that maybe some of the older generations are getting a little bit anxious about what's going to happen to meetings when they're gone, basically, because they're not seeing all of these young people stepping into the exact same shoes that they've got. But I think a lot of young Quakers, certainly ones that I've talked to, like, we don't want that pressure to kind of just be the ones to take over everything as it is and just kind of have all these time commitments and stuff, because it is a lot of time commitments and it is a lot of kind of boring work, really, which, you know, admin-y kind of stuff, which doesn't necessarily seem necessary. When, I mean, one of my friends, I was talking to her the other day, and she was like, you know, the kind of one of the key things about Quakerism is that you just need a room, or not even a room, just a place to sit in a circle in silence. Like that is all you need for Quakerism to work. And so having all of these crazy things around and all these committees and all these things to do, it just seems like it's almost taking the Quakerism out of Quakerism. And it'll be really nice if that kind of divide can be worked out in a way that young Quakers can feel like they can say to the older generations, actually, it's going to be fine, don't worry, we will do what we need to do to kind of keep things going in the way that will be necessary. Like, you don't have to have everything exactly the same as it goes through history.
Do you think there's scope for Friends at large being more active or vocal in the community about issues?
I think definitely, yeah. I feel like that's something that maybe has kind of been lost a little bit. When you look back at Quaker history and you see all the stuff that was really well known that Quakers were doing in communities and stuff, and obviously there's been different periods, and there are still lots of places where Quakers are known and are doing lots of stuff. But again, I think it's almost partly because of all being bogged down by kind of the admin of just kind of working out Quaker meetings themselves, that there's almost less time and less energy to be doing work with people and joining up with different groups and stuff. Definitely. And that's something that I'm quite interested in, and I like getting to know about different faith groups in the local area and things like that, and I'd love to do a bit more of that. And work.
Can I ask you? Do you feel like an obligation on that part, or a responsibility?
No, not at all. No, I don't feel like there's any. You mean like any responsibility to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all. It's just something that I'm personally interested in. And I've met and I've worked in a Catholic school, and I've lived with people from the Church of Latter-day Saints before, and like I've got a few connections to different religions, and I just find it really interesting kind of utilizing those connections as you are doing, with your connections around the world and stuff, and it's a really good thing to do. But I think Quakers could do more of that, maybe, if there was more time and energy from from all the business of being Quaker.
And that brings to an end another episode of the Friendly Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, don't forget you can subscribe to our social channels, and if you'd like to find out more about Quakers in Ireland, you can find us online at quakers.ie.